All right, so welcome to today's midnight training session covering scheduling and job costing. Today we'll be covering topics regarding the various methods of getting your job costing records applied to an order, and we'll also see how that data is reflected on any of our job costing based reports. I'm going to start by taking a look at our admin menu. Under our global settings, we have the dynamic job board sub-menu. If you click into this, you're given various statuses that you can associate with your services as you mark them as complete, incomplete, or in progress. You can also mark different urgencies or priorities for your job. This doesn't tie into the job costing expense, but it is helpful for information. We also have the default job in status that is updated on our dynamic job board. As you or your employees job into a particular service, the status of that service will become new and altered into the status of whatever you have set here by default. We also have under our admin menu the operation codes. Under here, you can identify different ops codes which relate to the different operations tied to your services. This can be used to allow your employees to log work against certain tasks and actually categorize the type of work that they're doing for that specific task. The last key area in our admin menu can be found under the employee records themselves. Under an employee record, in the job tracking submenu, you can define your wage rate, which is the hourly rate that you're paying your employee, and a burden rate associated with any type of offset expenses that you're paying, such as insurance costs, liability, any kind of expenses like that. We also have our kiosk control. In here, if you're utilizing our Shopfloor application, you can define whether or not your employees can log themselves into multiple jobs, how many jobs they're allowed to be logged into it simultaneously, whether or not they must clock in and clock out before being able to log time against jobs, whether or not they're considered a temp or temporary employee for expense tracking long-term, and their kiosk code in order to log into the system with their clock-in records and also their job cost records. Finally, a convenience under the standard services list. Under each service, you can identify as to whether or not your service is available to be modified or updated on the dynamic job board. By checking the Show on DJB/Calendar checkbox, you make it so that way on the DJB, you can update time records and statuses of your particular services on any particular job. You also have the Show on Shopfloor display view. What this does is it makes the service available to be viewed on the Shopfloor app. So that way, if you're using an iPad or any type of device that connects to the Shopfloor instance, you can log in and log your time against a particular activity. This works in tandem with the service type, as this list gives you a kiosk hide option for a particular department. If there's a department or service type that you want to show on your estimates and orders, but you do not wish to have available on your job costing records or your dynamic job board, you can uncheck the checkbox here or simply check the box for hiding, and that will make it so that group of services will not be displayed on the job board. So there's three key ways to enter job cost expenses. The first can be accessed through the job costing module itself. Under here, when the form loads, this will display all of your completed job costing records that have been entered into Midnight, either through this screen or through the Shopfloor app. If you need to make any changes to a completed record, you can simply search by using the filter options above, and then click into that record simply by clicking the job number link. This brings you to the Edit Job Cost form, which allows you to modify any of the fields here, whether it be start time and stop time, the employee that's involved with the particular task, the total time that was worked, which is deriving into the expenses against the job itself, as well as the service and any machinery that's utilized for the specific job and task. After I make any changes in here, I can simply click Save and Close and commit that. And now I have a modified expense against my job. If you need to create a new instance, you can do so simply by clicking New Time Record. This allows you to log in an employee. And this screen is what you would see as a clock in method or clock out method. So you can log an employee as being clocked in for a particular period of time. I'm identifying my total time as being derived from my time in to time out within the date in and date out. Keeping in mind that you can do something as in an overnight shift and update your time accordingly. So that way your date starting in as your next day calculates in to show that you have your employee having worked overnight. Under our time records list is where you can see these clock in and clock out entries. And the service entries that we've plugged into the system under our job cost records list can be found by accessing the Enter Service Time menu or the Enter Production Time menu. Both options under here allow you to pick an employee and with various detailed containers of information fill out information blocks as to what it is that each person has worked on. Under the Enter Service Time, I can simply pick my employee record, the job that was worked on, the operation, and the time. And when I click Save and Close, now I've given the actual instance of a time record, which will display in our job cost record search. If you need to enter the information in a more detailed way, you can use the Enter Production Time. In here, you can select the employee, the job that they work on, the individual service by clicking the Select button and picking what it is that was worked on, picking any specific machinery that was utilized. In this case, it could be something as simple as a press or even just a computer. And they can also log in the total time spent in minutes and starting and stopping counts to let you know what the total work is that was done. Now, if I look back in my job cost records, I'll see that I have two lines. One for my artwork setup, placed under the service time list, and one for my production time setup, set under the production time list. Both are used for job cost expense tracking. They're just two different ways to enter. One last bit of clarity is that the time records list is only for clock in and clock out times, whereas the job cost records is only for job in and job times for job out. The final method of getting data plugged into the system without using the Shopfloor app is to actually go into the dynamic job board. Under here, you can look up a specific job and any particular task on that job. And if work is being done against a particular task, you can click on that task's actual time. And much like the service time entry screen that we saw in the job cost module, we can pick the employee working on the task, the operation that they're working on, the total time that was spent, and any comments necessary. After clicking submit, our total time updates under the actual time spent. And if we look back in our job cost records, we'll see a third line which is added in to show just a simple bit of information, such as the total time spent on the particular job and the date that it was done. Under the dynamic job board, if you click actual time multiple times to add multiple user job entries, the total times will stack. In this case now I can see that combined my two entries calculate to 2 hours worth of work, which I can see on this window with my other employees' time logged against. Now for it to mark a service as complete, so that way it falls off of our production boards and job costing reports like our production schedule and our dynamic job board here. We can simply change our status from new to completed. And once you save this, now the service falls off of the dynamic job board and time can no longer be added against that service through this method, unless you click the Show Completed Tasks list and then re-click in to update the time. Now, if you utilize our Shopfloor application, then you'll be able to log in to our system using the URL that's provided. Under here, you'll be required to download what we call our user agent spoofer. By converting this to an iPad view, because it was designed for iDevice compatibility, you can log in with your accountant's default Shopfloor login credentials. And then once you've logged in with the key account, you can plug in your individual employee kiosk code number. You can job into your tasks by selecting from the breakdown, tapping the service that you'd like to select, marking the machine that you're doing your work on, and then filling out details such as your start count and any comments associated. And once you click Job Out, you're now given the option to job out of the service that you were involved with. give it a new status of either completed or anything else that you have available under your DJB list from your global settings. And then commit this record to show that I have a calculated total time worked on this particular job. Be aware that if you do have an iPad, iPhone, or other mobile device, logging into your Shopfloor will allow you to have this automatically converted to the mobile view so that you won't have to run this user agent spoofer. But on a PC, this allows your system to run it with full compatibility. You can see the work that I just added in on the job board, or I'm sorry, the shop floor, and all the details associated with it. Finally, if we take a look at some of the reports associated, we can view, for starters, within the job itself, the job detail analysis report. Under here, you'll see a breakdown of any expenses related against the job. In this case, we're going to see our service revenue, which is the total of all of our service sales minus tax. And we'll see our inventory expenses calculated from attached inventory through the job's inventory tab. We'll also see any click charges associated with a press as a digital press. And from the top down, we'll see a breakdown of our labor expenses, which sum out to show the total time times the user's wage rate to give us a full DLC per task, summed together to show the total labor expenses for the job. You can also assign your purchase orders to your jobs. Expenses from a PO come out against the job and show as line items on the job cost records, as well as shipping expenses, which are pulled under the shipping tab, under shipment tracking. So that way your detailed information on your shipment expenses is calculated as well. We'll set up a purchase order really quick, so that way we can tie that to our purchase order connectivity in the job detail analysis report. We get a full breakdown of our complete expenses. I'll modify this PO to show that the entire contents of this PO will be tied to job 1615. And I'll also go into another purchase order and identify that one of the items on this PO is extended its costs for 1615 by removing the one in the order header and adjusting each line to have its own PO cost to associate for each job. Now if we return to the job and take a look at the job cost report one more time, we'll see a breakout of the associated PO as well as the shipping charges that we just added. The details are explained out on each line to show which PO they come from and the costs, as well as the shipping details, which mimics the screen of the pop-out that we saw under the shipment tracking menu. Finally, you'll see that we have our issues expense. When you're in a job, under the quick links, you can add or track an issue against a job. This is commonly used for situations in which you have to associate expenses from either rework or machine issues. In here, you can select under your version of the issue tracking instance that you brought up, the service that you're doing your issue against, and the other details to associate other information to the task. And also tie in an issue cost, so that way your issue can be associated with proper expense deduction against the job. Now, if we were to bring up our report one last time, we'll see a line tracked for issue expenses of 250, equal to what we just did in the issue tracking window. We'll have the line broken down so that way you can see the full details of the expense. And if there's a credit associated, the credit also gets added to the total expenses to determine our profitability. If we enter our reports module now, we'll also see under the job costing reports, a job detail analysis report. This is the same report that we just looked at. However, under here, you can pick the order number. So in this case, you can pull up multiple orders quickly to see the full detailed breakout on each one. We also have the active job detail report. This lets you know what users are clocked in to any particular tasks. We have the employee detailed time clock report, which shows clock in, clock out times as well as dates, and can be sorted or filtered by date and also employee. We have the employee timesheet report, which is just a secondary view of the same sort of thing, only this allows us to quickly access if our employees are clocked into a point of reaching overtime or not, based on an assumed 40-hour work week, Sunday through Friday. Additionally, there is the summary profitability all and summary profitability by customer reports. These allow us to compare job detail information, so that way we can look at profitability across multiple jobs at once. You see a breakdown of service revenue versus labor costs and added in expenses from other sources to give us a total identifier of profitability, which is just a simple division of revenue by labor and expense. The profitability by customer report shows pretty much the same thing, only this groups out your information by customer differently. And lastly, the service detail time clock report can be used to double check the work that your users have logged in against. So when you're tracking your time cost expenses, you can confirm that any work being done by your employees matches up with the times that they're logging in Shopfloor and double checking them against job costing reports like our job detail analysis to make sure that your wage rates are being properly determined. That's pretty much everything for our job costing system. I'll go ahead and close our recording session and open up for Q&A.